Come on, sit back in your favorite chair. I want to welcome you to another podcast episode of Plugged into Christ. This is your host, Pastor and Teacher William Poulos. Today, here on Plugged into Christ podcast, we have archaeologist Dr. Jordan McClinton. Jordan serves currently as the area supervisor at Shiloh, overseeing Area D, and is working on a dissertation for his PhD at Veritas International University. Additionally, he is the co-director of the Joshua, Judges, and Jesus Museum at the Bible Seminary. Since beginning his volunteer work with ABR in 2018, he has participated in multiple excavation seasons at Shiloh and contributed to the Mount Ebal sifting project in 2020. Jordan McClinton holds a bachelor's degree in computer information systems from the University of Houston and a master's degree in biblical archaeology and history from the Bible Seminary. Jordan has worked in numerous corporate roles over the past 20 years, as well as having served on as a staff as an associate pastor at the Waters Church in Katy, Texas, since 2012. He has a deep passion for biblical history, ancient Near East, and how the fields of archaeology bring out the truth in both of them. Welcome, Jordan McClinton, to the Plugged into Christ podcast. Jordan, would you describe for us what got you interested in the field of archaeology?
Looking to become an archaeologist, I was looking to understand the Bible better. But all that to say, I'm also, I'm a child of the 80s, grew up, in the 1980s. And so, of course, I loved archaeology. I loved Indiana Jones and the idea of being a cool archaeologist with a whip and a hat and fighting off Nazis. But of course, that's not always the case in actual archaeology. But to be honest, part of my journey was, I began as a worship pastor, kind of in ministry. I'm still a worship pastor, but I did that for 15 years, and really, leading services, leading worship, Sunday mornings, but really decided to understand what true worship was outside of maybe just a Sunday morning experience, 20-minute song service that we have. But what does worship really mean, and how does that relate to our relationship with God? So that kind of took me down a path of wanting to understand the Bible better, and understand not just how we read it, but in context. What did it mean to the people that actually lived it and the events that actually took place? And so that led me to the Bible Seminary. And I kind of went in with that same sort of a, proposal. Like I would like to understand the Bible better, and really wasn't even thinking archaeology was going to be the answer to that. And then, of course, during this time, I also had a trip to the Holy Land and got to really, capture my heart, just geography and the land itself, and that paired with this master's program that I began at the Bible Seminary in biblical history and archaeology really is what kind of got me into this world. And through that, I got connected with the Associates for Biblical Research and the excavation at Shiloh, and so I've been, I think this will be my 8th season coming up here of excavating with ABR at Shiloh. And it's not necessarily I wanted to be an archaeologist from a kid. It's really the Lord's hand in all of this and just kind of directing me and me walking through doors of opportunity and just letting Him lead me. So. Mm-hmm.
And, wow. Yes, because sometimes our paths are not always directed. I know I went to school earlier in my life, but I had no direction. I went to a community college here in Ohio and had no direction. I wanted to get in the nursing program, at least I thought. But then I said, I love history. So it wasn't until many years later, my late 40s, that I actually began to take that very seriously and wanting to have a degree in that area. You're the area supervisor of the ancient dig at Shiloh, overseeing Area D. Describe for our podcast listeners what Area D is about and what has been discovered at Shiloh.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can give the long version or the short version. But essentially, Area D is well. Let's just back up a little bit. Shiloh, for your listeners, if you're familiar with, I guess the book of Samuel is really kind of where we really see the first location of the Shiloh really kind of be mentioned. It's mentioned about 32 times in the Old Testament, but we really see the tabernacle is here, the Ark of the Covenant is at Shiloh. The priesthood is at Shiloh. The sacrificial system is taking place at Shiloh before David moves everything to Jerusalem during the time of the kings. So really, Shiloh is, it's kind of between the time or around the time of the judges, before the time of the kings. Samuel is raised here, and Samuel's kind of a transitional period between the judges period and the time of the kings, the monarchy period in Israel. And so, they've got the tabernacle and the sacrificial system is taking place. People are coming from all over the country to sacrifice for atonement, and they're bringing first fruit offerings and grain offerings, and kind of their tithe, I guess, offering that they're bringing. So, as we started excavating at Shiloh, we're looking for, we're expecting to find some evidence of this tabernacle system as we're kind of going through these different time periods. And the area that I have been excavating at is what we call a favisa. It's a Latin phrase or a Latin word that just essentially means a deposit, a sacred deposit of offerings. So think of it as like a sacrificial trash dump. So as people are coming and sacrificing objects or animals on an altar, those things can't be used again. They're not going to be reused. They're not going to take the vessels and reuse them again, and they're certainly not going to use them in any other context. And so those are then ceremonially disposed of. They're broken, they're buried, and so they've been offered to God, kind of never to be seen again. And so that's what we're finding in Area D, this area of the site that I am excavating. We're finding an abundance of this sacrificial disposal, or the deposits of this all throughout. And so animal bones, an overabundance of animal bones, burned, charred, young kosher animals, ornate pottery. So these aren't just domestic plates or dishes that you're using in your home. These are goblets or chalices, painted bowls, things that are being used in some sort of a ceremony. And then special objects, valuable things that are being buried or being offered to God and then buried in this area. So that's kind of the high level explanation of what Area D is at Shiloh.
Oh, very nice, very nice. John, you worked with Dr. Scott Stripling, whom I also had on this show, on this podcast. I love what he does. He is fantastic. Another sharp guy, by the way, and putting that as a note out, is Dr. David Graves. He's amazing. You worked with Dr. Stripling. Are there any other archaeologists that you've worked with that are notable?
So I've worked with Dr. Graves, as you mentioned. I was on his podcast a few months ago. Great archaeologist working. He did a lot of work at a sister site of our organization at Tal El Hammam in Jordan. And so Dr. Steve Collins, who was the director of that excavation, they have since ended their official excavation in Jordan.
And was Dr. Everett part of that also?
Yes.
Angela
Everett? Yes. Yes, she was actually. Yeah. I know you had her on recently, another VIU graduate, so that's great that you guys are working with that. He's not necessarily an archaeologist, but he comes and digs with us. It's part of our faculty at the Bible Seminary. Written over 200 books, a lot on textual criticisms. Dr. Craig Evans, he'll be with us this summer, and a great friend and mentor of mine. We have archaeologists come in, to the site every so often. It's a fairly important site, and so we feel honored, and we get a lot of guest appearances, I guess, from people coming to visit the site every so often. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've do you have, and I'm asking this as sort of like an outer question, do you have to, just like any site, have to work a season and then cover up, and so you could then have to come back the next season and continue your work, or do you leave it open as some sites do?
No, great question. And there are a lot of sites that need to be protected, and once you finish the season, you kind of rebury at least a layer just to cover everything else up so that it's not disturbed by the next the next season. And so we excavate. We really only excavate 4 weeks out of the year, which I know it surprises a lot of people. I think that we're excavating year round, but it's essentially a month between May and June that we're excavating, and then the rest of the season the site stays open. Shiloh is a protected site, meaning that it's not necessarily a national park, but it is a very it's a tourist attraction. It's a fenced in site. People come and visit there year round. So for a lot of Jewish people, they come as a pilgrimage to come to Shiloh. It's a wonderful place to visit. I actually had a friend who was giving a tour just a couple of days ago, and walked through Shiloh and sent me a picture of my area. And so I saw it. It looked exactly like I left it. So I know no one's disturbing it. Yeah. But we're very privileged at Shiloh that we don't have to worry about the site being disturbed. It's very well respected. It's very well protected. And so for the most part, aside from, a little bit of winter rains that may wash things out a little bit, when we arrive here in the next couple of months in May, it'll for the most part be exactly how we left it.
Yes. Because the weather there is not always, it does rain, but does it? I don't know. I have never been there, and I would love to go to the Holy Land. Believe me.
Yeah.
But is there a winter? It doesn't snow.
There is. Believe it or not, I tell people, I'm from Texas, from the Houston area. I tell people it's very similar to Texas weather.
Really?
The temperature can flip on a dime, and sometimes you'll have a mild winter, and sometimes you'll get a snowstorm just out of the blue. And then summers. So again, our dig season is mid-May to mid-June, and so we're right on the edge of the hottest part of the year, which I appreciate. So, typically like week 1 and week 2, so mid-May, I think last season, mornings were like in the 60s.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And some of the high temperatures were in the 80s. And so it's fairly nice. But then, of course, you're always going to get the few days or towards the end of the dig season, as we get into to June, maybe some 100-degree weather, and we're always cognizant about that. And if it's going to be extremely hot, we'll cut off an hour early or so to get out of the heat.
Right.
And that kind of brings me to my next, to that point. we start digging at 6 in the morning.
Ooh.
Is when we kick off the dig, and so
That makes for a long day, doesn't it?
Yeah, so breakfast starts at 4 a.m. And we're on the bus. The bus leaves at 4:59, and so we get to the site around 5:30, 5:45. So we're digging at 6 a.m. Lunch is at 10:30, and we're on the bus back to the hotel around 1 o'clock. And so the idea is that we're missing the hottest part of the day while we're digging.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, because I was reading in reading Dr. Ryan's book about his exploits both in Egypt and, well, especially in Egypt. He talked about the weather being absolutely oppressive, over 100 degrees, and going into the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which some of them are flooded or have been flooded, and they have debris. And they're finding things like bones, and they're not finding whole skeletons, but just bones scattered all over the place. So, I get it, but it gives me a sense, Jordan, of what it's like to go out there and dig, whether it's in Egypt or in Israel or wherever it's at. It gives me that picture. And he shows pictures in the book about, of sites inside and the walls. Because that's where my area is at. My research is all of the connections between the Bible and those other ancient cultures, whether it's Egypt or the Hittites or the Babylonians or the Greeks, whoever. That's what I study, and it's phenomenal to learn all of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal study. Absolutely.
And I don't have enough time in my lifetime to accomplish everything, to even keep up with everything that comes out, everything new. Then I have to also go back in the past and find out and read books like, Dr. Woolley's book on the past in the Hittites, or Dr. Kenyon about Jericho, and I have all those books here. I do a lot of reading and a lot of research, but it's often very hard to keep up with everything.
Well, that's kind of a good point, William. Archaeology it's a very slow process, and it's sometimes hard to think that we're not. It's not my goal to go out there and find everything, right? I mean, I think I read. I mean, at this point, maybe 5% of the Holy Land has been excavated at this point.
Right.
And this is archaeology's been going as an actual science for 150 years, so it's not that old, but we've been digging for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And just understanding that we're helping push forward this knowledge slowly so that future generations can continue this, and we're keying off of and gathering information from past generations, and we're utilizing new technologies. We have a better understanding of things like carbon-14 dating and petrographic analysis, and all of these different scientific testing that we can use now that help us. But at the same time, we're slowly doing this. We're slowly making progress. None of us are going to get any of this within our own lifetimes, right?
Right. No. It's kind of it kind of makes me sad in a way, Jordan, that it's considered, when you go to college and you want to do archaeology, it's considered a liberal art. When you do use, as archaeologists, many scientific processes, such as carbon-14 dating and photogrammetry and all those things, I don't, I guess that's how they post it, or they put it in. It's a liberal art. It's not a science per se, not an absolute science, but I happen to believe it should also be part of science as well, wholeheartedly.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I would consider myself a scientist. We're taking hypothesis and testing and seeing what that test results, right? I mean, and archaeology is an interesting area because it is under the umbrella of history, right? The same way that like anthropology, sociology, archaeology, right? I mean, these all kind of are all under the umbrella of history, but at the same time, it is very scientific, and we are applying many scientific technologies and methodologies to better understand and to help us, tell this story better.
You were part of, you can tell our podcast audience because you were part of the Mount Ebal sifting project in 2020.
I was.
Can you illuminate us to how that brings the Bible together with archaeology?
Specifically Mount Ebal or the
Mm-hmm.
kind of the sift?
Yes, Mount Ebal.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, Mount Ebal and Shiloh, we're in the central hill country, and so this is all kind of during the same time period. And for your listeners, the Associates for Biblical Research, ABR, one of our focus kind of areas is on the conquest period. So it started, with focusing on kind of Jericho and some of the research refuting some of the Kenyans' research at Jericho, and we dug at a site called Kerbet El Makaber,
mm-hmm.
which we feel is the best candidate for the site of AI,
mm-hmm.
The second site of the conquest.
Yes.
Now we're at Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle was established, kind of the first capital of Israel before Jerusalem. And in this time period, as they enter the land, God tells Joshua, when you gain a foothold in the land, go to Shechem
mm-hmm.
and renew covenant with the Lord. So remind yourself of this covenant that I've made with you through the Mosaic Law. And so they go and they split. And this is Deuteronomy 27, 28, I believe, where they're doing this covenant renewal ceremony between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Mount Gerizim was the mountain of blessings. Mount Ebal was the mountain of curses.
Mm-hmm.
And so they split up the tribes, and they would recite the law. Blessed is the man who honors their father and mother. The other half, cursed is the man who does not honor their father and mother, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of going through the blessings and the consequences of not following this law. And God tells Joshua to build an altar on Mount Ebal, which consequently, this is, we don't need an altar on the mountain of blessings. We need an altar on the mountain of consequences, right?
Right.
So they build an altar, they sacrifice to the Lord. Joshua writes the law on the altar itself. Well, fast forward to the 1980s, an archaeologist by the name of Adam Zertal was excavating or was doing a survey of the area and came across this square altar, rectangular altar on Mount Ebal, and began excavating there. And by the end of his excavation, Adam was not a believer. He was kind of a secular archaeologist, as a lot of them are. Was convinced that this was Joshua's altar, and kind of announced this and was publicly criticized for taking this biblical stance that the Bible was accurate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Adam Zertal unfortunately passed away before his final excavation reports were published. And so, the past 40 years or so, other colleagues at some of the universities in the Hill Country have been working on his reports. And part of this process, our team at ABR was invited to go and wet sift Dr. Zertal's dump piles, like the piles of the material that he was discarding. We weren't doing actual excavation, but we went and sifted his dump, his material that he dumped. And through that wet sifting process, which he did not use, we were able to uncover quite a few very important things, a lot of pottery, some objects, and then, as you probably are aware, we also uncovered a lead tablet that we determined was a defixio, or a curse tablet, with actual writing on it. So there's some peer-reviewed articles out now that walk through that and talk through some of our deciphering of that and some of the epigraphers that were a part of that process. So yeah, that's kind of the background of Mount Ebal.
Oh, great. Wonderful. My next question to you is,
also, I mentioned wet sifting as one of the technologies. I mean, this is an extremely important technology.
Oh, shit. Go ahead, Jordan. Go ahead. About wet sifting?
Yeah, wet sifting. So, yeah, it's it's an important technology that we use at Shiloh. It's something that a lot of teams do not use. And it's fairly simple, but it's simply, we just wash the material that we're excavating. And so, this has played a huge role in some of the finds that we have excavated, really in Area D, so the Favisa at Shiloh. So we have volunteers that are excavating and looking with their eyes as they're digging, but we're then taking that material, that dirt, to a dry sifter, which is like our second stage, and we sift that material through a dry screen. And then that material then goes down to our wet sifting process, or our wet sifting station, where it's simply washed with water. And so, coins, beads, jewelry, and in the case of Area D, some very important gold objects that were covered in mud, were caked in dirt, that we don't see with our eyes, but once you wash it with water, then it becomes visible. And so it's a very important process that unfortunately a lot of teams are not either able to use or don't have the resources to use, but it does help a lot. And as I mentioned, it's uncovered some important things in Area D, including some gold objects.
Wonderful. You're the co-director of Joshua Judges in the Jesus Museum. Can you tell us about what work you do there?
Absolutely. So, believe it or not, this museum was actually my project when I was a master's student. So I have curated the museum and set everything up and did all of the publication for it, wrote up all of the descriptions. But it's a museum in Katy, Texas. It resides at the Bible Seminary. We've got about 150 objects. I would say about 75% of it are authentic items from the Holy Land. And the idea was that we wanted, kind of came about during COVID, when people were not able to leave and go to Israel, but to have a little bit of the Holy Land here in the United States. And so it walks you chronologically through those time periods. And so it starts in about, 1400 BC or so, the time of the conquest, and it takes you through the world of Jesus. So it kind of starts at the Exodus, or the entrance into Canaan, the time of Joshua, through the monarchy period, a little bit of the Hellenistic period, or the intertestamental period with the Greek influence and into the world of Jesus, the Roman period. It ends kind of with crucifixion exhibit and resurrection exhibit. And so, yeah, people, it's a wonderful experience. And, we have some, showcases here and there that we bring in every so often. One of them in the next couple weeks in April, we have a Shroud of Turin exhibit coming for the entire week. And so we'll have that on. It's not the official Shroud of Turin, but we'll have a really good replica and a nice exhibit that people can come and experience that and kind of see some of the evidence of the shroud. Yeah.
That's wonderful. You and I, Jordan, are in lockstep when it comes to the Bible. We believe it's a historical book. But there are two camps of archaeologists. One of them is a maximalist, the other is minimalist. Maximalists believe in the Bible, and they apply it to their archaeology or their history or philology or even anthropologists. There's Christian anthropologists out there. But the minimalists, when they go out and dig, sometimes they'll go out and their techniques are great. Kathleen Kenyon's techniques were great. And there were many others that use great technique, but when they published their research or wrote books, their conclusions were wrong. Can you tell us why minimalists, where they falter in applying their research or to the archaeological finds of the Bible?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more of a complex conversation. I mean, it's not always black or white. But I think for the most part, when you discredit or discount the historical reliability of the Bible, the biblical text, you're eliminating a massive guide to understanding the material culture that you're excavating. And so, I tell people, like, if you're looking in the wrong place in the wrong time period, you're guaranteed to find the wrong stuff, or you're guaranteed to interpret the stuff the wrong way. And so it's interesting to me that people will use every Near Eastern text, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Babylonian, use any text they want that's around and use it as historical documentation. But when it comes to the biblical text, you can't take any of it as truth. It's all fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as time goes on, and we're starting to see this more and more, as archaeological evidence, archaeology plays such a huge role in I would say the verification of the historicity of the Bible. More people trust it, and I think the more a minimalist will start to say, okay, that there's got to be some historical reliability to this text, because we're finding seals and bula and an inscription that references people in the Bible. I mean, there's not a person in the New Testament, Roman emperor, biblical king, or not biblical king, but Roman authority. We don't have coins. We don't have some sort of an archaeological record of their lives. And then, of course, all of the extra biblical historical documentation that corroborates the biblical accounts. It's hard. It's hard to just completely discredit it. And I think as we're seeing, it's becoming more and more. It's hard for someone to say that the Bible is completely inaccurate or is completely fairy tale, because there is so much archaeological evidence. And I mean, how much does one need, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
100 we would call these synchronisms, right?
Right.
Something that we read in the text, we're also finding in the ground. Like, how many do you need? 100? Would that work? Or 1,000? I mean, there are thousands of small synchronisms all throughout the Bible that have been that have been connected to the archaeological record that just in my mind, it's hard. I can't, what was it, Norm Geisler? I can't remember who wrote that. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, or I don't have enough faith to not believe that the Bible is accurate. I mean, you kind of have to ignore so much in order to continue to discredit it, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And in lockstep with that, as you know, I had Dr. Ken Hovind, creation science teacher and debater.
Sure.
And we discussed that nearly that same question, but his is more on the creation and Noah's flood and proving those areas that evolution is wrong and those areas of the Bible are absolutely right. And he said that, he mentioned that, and I've had phone conversations with him as well, that evolution and the teaching of it from public school through college has often damaged a lot of people. And when they become professionals, then that plays a role in their decision making when it comes to the Bible. They just deny the truth of the Bible. He also said too that who are you going to believe? You're going to believe some text of because you remember and I know you're working on your PhD and you're well into way into your studies actually, and if you know about the biblical the kings, the lists of kings from the Near East, hundreds of thousands of years. Well, who are you going to believe? What the Bible says, what God sees from above, or what people write? And that happened with Ramses III and the Hittite king when he claimed that when the Egyptian king claimed that Ramses III claimed that he won the Battle of Kadesh, and it actually was a draw. As you look at the historical and archaeological evidence, there was evidence that neither side won. But what did he do? He went back home to his people, and he wrote in hieroglyphs that he had won and he had beat the Hittites in order to get more praise upon himself and make himself look good. So who are you going to believe? You going to believe the Bible, or are you going to believe man's word? You and I discussed in the phone leading up on this podcast. What do you believe? Do you believe that minimalism has damaged archaeology and history in the telling of it correctly?
Maybe damaged is a harsh word. I mean, I think if we were to speak to a minimalist right now, I think they would probably say, I'm a critic, a textual and archaeological critic, and so there's probably some validity to there being some criticism out there of what you're finding, and versus the text. I mean, no one is advocating that we just take something completely blindly, right?
Right.
I think we should be weary of someone to say just believe the Bible because it's the Bible, right? I think a Mormon could say the same thing about the Book of Mormon, right? It's like, right. Yeah, but there's not any archaeological evidence towards that. But I guess when it comes to damage, I mean, I think there's been mainly in mainstream academia, and we see this throughout. You talked about creationism. There is a status quo, I guess, now that if you walk into a certain university and claim that the Bible is historical, or if you claim that evolution is not the only option, mm-hmm. You may lose your job, or you may not get a promotion, or you may not get tenured. And so I think that in itself has caused a rift in, academia and what you're teaching students.
Absolutely.
So you've got professors now. Who knows if they truly believe it or not? But they're certainly not going to teach it right at a level and get blacklisted from their careers. That when I'm done with all of this, like I'm going to have spent a decade of my life, right, doing this a master's and PhD program and writing a dissertation, and it's like that's a lot of sacrifice that I made, and it's like I want to be able to use it, right? And so
right.
There's a lot of things that kind of I think play into that, and so I guess from your question, I mean, has it damaged archaeology? Maybe. I mean, it's definitely. Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, you had a conversation with Dr. Stripling a couple of weeks ago, or however long ago that was. I mean, he's mentioned he's gone into universities or been invited to universities and talked to archaeology students, and have used the Bible as a reference guide. And he said people just students have come up to him and said, I've never in my studies have I ever in biblical archaeology have I ever been shown the actual synchronisms in the Bible. And so I think we're certainly seeing a generation of biblical archaeologists that get through their degrees, and they've never used the Bible as a reference to the material that they're excavating. And so there is some concern, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm just amazed by the amount of authors, people who have, and I read a lot of books, on every side of the Southern Mediterranean, Near East, and Holy Land archaeology and history. And I have some here, like Dr. Toby Wilkinson, who's an Egyptologist, or Dr. Kara Cooney, and one of the areas that I hone in on, and there's many of them, there's a whole plethora of them, is about the Exodus. And yet in none of their books do they ever mention, they talk about Hatshepsut, they talk about Tutmosis III, Tutmosis II, Tutmosis I, and never once do they mention anything about Moses. It's not in Wilkinson's book or books, it's not in Kara Cooney's. They just leave it out. I mean, they just ignore it. And I think that's a point of emphasis, that if you're going to be tenured and be a prominent archaeologist, and you deny the Bible, I believe that's, from my opinion, is a real mistake. You're leaving a whole lot out. Their contention is, well, I haven't seen it. And it's been that contention for years and years. There's no evidence of the Exodus. There's no evidence that we could prove creation. There's no evidence of the flood, or it's regional, or any of those other arguments that just, to me, do not wash at all. So can you underscore why it is important for staying true to the Bible while performing archaeological historical work, or those who are involved in writing professional peer-reviewed papers in those areas?
Yeah, I think we've highlighted a little bit of this. I mean, I think as a believer, right? I think we have some theological reasons why we would use the Bible, or we would believe that the Bible is true. I mean, Jesus himself referenced the Old Testament, and he certainly believed it was true.
Mm-hmm.
But again, from a being thorough and a good biblical archaeologist. I mean, if I was a medieval archaeologist digging in, Great Britain, I would certainly use all of the available textual references to that time period.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, we miss a lot if you are not understanding the biblical text. And again, not just the words, not just the because there's all sorts of contention around different books of the Bible and who wrote them and was it exactly how it was written? The Pentateuch, is it word for word what it is today? I mean, all those things, but understanding the culture, understanding the people that lived there during those time periods,
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the there are just so many synchronizations between the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, and things. Kenneth Kitchen, on the reliability of the Old Testament, wrote an amazing book on just these the reliability of the Old Testament and how so many people, these minimalists, will essentially say that the Old Testament wasn't written until the Persian period after they got back from exile.
Right.
Well, how in the world do you write a historically accurate book with things like inflation and changing of names, like a person from a post-exilic period is not going to know. I mean, they don't have the internet. They don't have historical things that they can go back and sift through. I mean, these stories and these writings were passed down through generations, and it's just I think I've lost the path a little bit, but it's extremely important when it comes to whatever you're excavating or whatever you're trying to interpret and understand from history, to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to use, and the biblical text. And I know so many people get hung up because they're bringing some religious chip on their shoulder or whatever it is, that this is a religious book and you can't believe it because they're just using it for propaganda or whatever reasoning they have. At the end of the day, it is a historical document, and there are so many archaeological synchronizations that you could point out, just like any other historical document that would, call that into the validity.
Yeah, an interesting. Here's an interesting fact. I don't know if you know this or not, but in all the years of research that Dr. Hoban has done, he was, by the way, a science teacher before he was saved. He taught science in high school, and then became an evangelist and debater. He's debated almost 400 times. He's debated evolutionists, people in the field of astronomy and biology and in all these different fields who believe in evolution, by the way. He said that, and he said it many times. You could catch his show, by the way, on Rumble. He said many times that the first two books of the Bible in Genesis were written by God because there was no man there to write until they were created. Now that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yes. Moses wrote the books after, from those chapters after, and the other books of the Pentateuch. John, give us the listening audience here what you believe are good books alongside the Bible that really accentuate the truthful Bible, which is supported by archaeology and history.
Well, I mean, the first one I had just mentioned, so, I mean, this is a long read, but, Kenneth Kitchen's On the Reliability of the Old Testament is a great book.
He was fantastic, wasn't he, Dr. Kitchen?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately,
how about Dr. Gray's books on biblical archaeology, volume 1 and 2?
Yeah, so Dr. Gray says, and he's got quite a few books that are out there. Let's see, just another plug for ADR. If you go to the Associates for Biblical Research, there is just a plethora of research out there book recommendations that really do point towards the biblical history and connection to it. I'm kind of looking through my library here in front of me. Titus Kennedy just wrote a great book called The Essential Archaeological Guide to the Bible Lands. That's a great book. Dr. Steve Collins and Joseph Holden wrote a great book called The Harvest Bible Lands. I'm trying to find it. Just kind of it's kind of a walkthrough of just biblical archaeology. Shows a lot of really great synchronisms. Dr. Stripling wrote a great book called The Trowel and the Truth, which again, really connects to the history of the Bible. Kind of a great textbook type book is Randall Price, The Handbook of Biblical Archaeology. That's a great book as well. The Quest by Lee Rittmeyer. It's an awesome book about the Temple Mount. Great read. Those are probably some good, just the reliability of the biblical text and kind of help you kind of walk through some of that. Yeah,
because what got me started was as a kid, I was 7 years old, and I was reading. By the way, I was reading up late at night, very late, until my father got up and I had to go to work. And he was saying to me, what are you still doing up? You need to be in bed. It was the summertime. We were out of school, but nonetheless, I was reading God's Greats and Scholars by C.W. Serum. And I've also read his other book, Hands on the Past, in which all the archaeologists tell their stories about what they've done, and including Budge and all the old archaeologists. And then I read also The Bible is History by Warner Keller. And I don't know if that was required reading when you were in college, but I love that book, though I don't agree with every single thing. There's a couple points in which his interpretation is off a bit. Well,
sure.
I want to thank you, Dr. Jordan McClinton. I want to call you doctor already. See that?
I'll take it.
You're there. You're nearly there anyway.
I'm getting close.
And it's taking you. And how long is it? My brother wrote a paper. He's a doctor of music, Peter.
Yes.
And how long does it usually take you to write a paper like that?
So I've got a pretty strict schedule that I'm trying to stay to. That has me going through April of 2027, I believe. And so a year from this April, I'll hopefully be finished and getting ready to defend and be finished with all of that. So, and I've been working on it since last December. So,
oh my goodness,
overall, it'll be about 3 years of my dissertation. And about 3 years or so, 2.5 years of coursework. So yeah, it's not a fast process.
No, not by any means.
They don't give these away for free, for
and
sure.
That includes researching and writing, because it has to be written. My brother would tell me this. It has to be written a certain way, in whatever specifications they want. How they want it written. Here's what you put the title on the page and your name down below or above, and then you got to skip a whole page. You got to skip another page before you start your abstract, and it's like, I read his paper, by the way, and it was 450 pages long.
Yeah, that's about right.
And
they say your dissertation should be graded on weight, not on page numbers. How heavy is it? And I'm blessed because as you talk about research, a lot of people don't have the ability to write their dissertation on research that they're doing themselves, new research. And so my dissertation is on Area D, on the Sfavisa that we're talking about. So all of everything I'm writing is my own research and scientific testing. And so it truly is new information that's kind of being brought to the archaeological community. And then on top of that, Dr. Stripling is my dissertation board chair, and so he's obviously he's the director of the excavations. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a beautiful relationship of me writing also not just my dissertation, but something that's benefiting our dig and new information about a very important concept. I mean, we didn't get into this much, but this is the worship remnants of the early Israelites. Mm-hmm. And so this is extremely important information for us to understand, during the time of the judges, or, between the time of the judges and the kings, when we hear about, all of these, everyone doing what's right in their own eyes and different worshiping and all this syncretistic type activity going on. How are they, what does the material culture tell us? And so it's an interesting and important area. And, back to kind of what I originally mentioned, the Lord has brought me into this very interesting journey of, being a student of modern worship, being a worship pastor, and then plopping me right down in the middle of an ancient worship deposit, and understanding the ancient practices of worship. And so it kind of is a surreal, have to pinch myself and really just kind of step back and just laugh of like, God, you are just amazing at how you orchestrate all of these things. And I guess my encouragement to your readers is like, don't discredit the journey that God's taking you on. He may take you, through different areas of life, and you're doing something that maybe doesn't make any sense during the season. But trusting God and continue to walk in his direction, let him open up doors and opportunities, and trust him as you're going through them, and let him kind of puzzle piece and marry all of these things together, and just kind of sit back and watch. It's a pretty cool adventure that he has all of us on if we let him.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my brother does that. He's now retired. And though he still is retired, he does get from the University of Cincinnati the ability to teach classes on various occasions. He writes papers. He goes over to Italy. He writes them in Latin about Renaissance and Renaissance music. And then he goes over to Italy and he reads those papers in Latin, and they critique them, which I think is phenomenal. Different cities in Italy. I think it's phenomenal. I think I've been following in his footsteps for a while. I mean, he inspired me to go to college, even though it was late in my life. But the way he writes and how he does things is very professional. And that's what I want to continue to do, is be professional. I want to thank you, Dr. McClinton, for being on Plugged into Christ podcast. I'd like to extend an offer for you to come back in the future and come back to our show and be a part of it. If you would please, you hold on for one moment. This concludes today's podcast. I want to personally thank you for listening in today, and to all our listeners in the United States as well as all over the world. Coming up on our next set of podcasts is part 4 of Answers Concerning Moses and the Exodus. I will commence teaching the Bible where we had finished the first book of Corinthians, and we'll be beginning teaching the second book of Corinthians. In March, we welcome Steve Brown, who has been a pastor for over 50 years. He runs the nonprofit Key Life, which he broadcasts shows and teaches the Bible. At Plugged into Christ, we fully support the missionary group Voice of the Martyrs out of Oklahoma, Associates for Biblical Research located in Akron, Pennsylvania, as well as Dr. Ken Hovind, evangelist, teacher, science teacher, and debater. He is the creator and chief operator of Dinosaur Adventureland, located in Alabama. You can listen to these podcasts on buzzsprout.com. You could also get them on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, Podcast Index, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Alexa, Podchaser, Pocket Cast, Deezer, Listen Notes, and Player FM. If you'd like to leave me a comment, just drop me a line on my email, Poulos, POULOSWT @yahoo.com, or go to the buzzsprout.com site and enter a comment under this podcast of Plugged into Christ. This has been a presentation of Plugged into Christ with your host, Pastor and Teacher William Poulos. Until we come together for our next broadcast, we are Plugged into Christ. Pray that God will be with you. May God's blessing be with you in your walk and faith in the Lord. Good night.